I took everything from them. Not some of it. Not most of it. Everything. The retirement accounts, the college funds, the life savings that 70-year-old men had spent 40 years building, sitting across from me at dinners where I poured the wine and told them they were safe. I took all of it, and I want you to understand something before I tell you how I did it. Before I explain the mechanics of 16 years and 1,400 people and $65 billion. Before any of that, I want you to understand that I don't regret it. Not because I'm a monster, not because I lack the capacity for remorse, because I genuinely believe, I still believe from inside a cell, that what I gave those people was worth more than what I took. Their money was replaceable. The certainty I gave them, that feeling of safety in a world that offers none, you cannot buy that anywhere. I sold it to them for 16 years. That is not theft. That is the oldest transaction in human history. 1,400 people handed me their futures. Not one of them asked the right question. This is the story of why they didn't, and why that matters more than anything I did. I want to tell you something about the world I came from, because the story they tell about people like me, the courtroom version, the newspaper version, that story starts in the middle. It starts when things are already broken. It never starts where things actually start. Things start with a belief. Mine was simple. The world does not reward honest mediocrity. It never has. It never will. You can be honest and comfortable if you're lucky. You can be dishonest and comfortable if you're careful. Or, and this is the thing nobody says at dinner parties or in business schools, you can occupy the space between those two things. The space where what you're doing isn't technically dishonest, it's just selective, incomplete, a version of the truth that serves everyone's interests, including the person receiving it. That space is where fortunes are made. That space is where I lived for the first 8 years of my career. I will tell you the exact moment I knew it had gone from selective to criminal. Stay with me until the end of this video, because that moment, the mechanics of how a person crosses that line, is the most useful thing I have left to offer the world. I started my firm in 1979, 26 years old. No inheritance, no connections, just an understanding of markets that other people seemed to lack and a willingness to work in ways that other people seemed unwilling to match. For 8 years I was legitimate, entirely. I want to be clear about this because the narrative makes it cleaner if I was always corrupt. I wasn't. For 8 years I built something real, and I was proud of it, and the pride was earned. Then the market shifted, the way it always does, not with a collapse, with a drift. A slow, quiet, 3-year drift away from the conditions that had made my strategy work. My real returns fell, not to zero, not to negative. They fell to normal, to the returns that every other fund manager in America was delivering. And I had a problem. My clients were not paying me for normal. They were paying me for certainty, for the specific, precious illusion that their money existed in a different category than everyone else's money, that it was safe from the things that made other people's money unsafe. And here is the choice that nobody wants to examine honestly. Because examining it honestly means acknowledging how human it is. I could tell them the truth. I could call every client, hold every dinner, look every person in the eye and say, the returns you have come to expect are no longer possible. You are now normal. Congratulations. Or I could buy time, 3 months, 6 months, a year. Time for the conditions to shift back. Time for me to find the angle, the edge, the thing that made my strategy extraordinary again. I chose time. That is all it was in the beginning. A bridge, a temporary structure over a temporary gap. The machine I built was not complicated. Every new investor's principal paid the returns of the previous investors. The math was elementary. Any second-year finance student could have traced it in an afternoon. But mathematics was not what I was managing. I was managing perception. Specifically, the perception that the mathematics did not need to be examined. This is a skill. It is a genuine, practiced, deeply sophisticated skill, and I was exceptional at it. I remembered the names of children. I knew which clients had been ill and which had grandchildren coming. I called on anniversaries. I was meticulous because meticulous care for a person's emotional reality creates a kind of loyalty that no investment return can replicate. My clients did not stay with me because of the numbers. They stayed with me because I made them feel known. There is a specific exhaustion that comes from being, for 16 years, the calmest person in every room. The person everyone looks to when the market moves, when the news is bad, when the thing they feared might happen starts to happen. I was that person for 16 years. And the exhaustion of it, the weight of being the last source of certainty for 1,400 people, is something no prosecutor and no journalist has ever managed to describe correctly. The first serious fracture was 2001. Markets collapsed, phones rang, my numbers, my smooth, unwavering, every quarter the same numbers, had to continue. I remember the night clearly. My office, 11 p.m., everyone else gone. I sat at my desk and I ran the calculation I had been refusing to run. What would it take at this point to make the real numbers match the reported numbers? What the actual gap was? The gap was not small. I sat there for 4 hours, and at some point around 3 in the morning I made a decision. That was not a single decision. It was the accumulation of 1,000 smaller decisions I had been making for years, finally becoming visible to me as what they actually were. I was not going to tell them, not because I was afraid of prison, not because I was greedy, because I could not stand to be the person who destroyed the certainty I had spent 20 years creating in 1,400 people. I could not watch their faces change. That is the honest answer. That is the answer I gave myself at 3 in the morning, and I believe it was true. The second fracture was 2008, and that time, everything broke at once. The financial crisis created something my machine could not survive. Simultaneous redemptions, every client calling at once, not sequentially, not gradually, simultaneously, in a single week. I had a fraction of what they believed I held. Not a small fraction, a very small fraction. 3 days. That's how long the machine could continue. On the third day, I called my sons into the office. I sat them down. I told them exactly what I had been doing since 1992. I watched their faces change. And here is the thing I need you to sit with before I tell you what I felt in that moment. Here is the thing that the sentencing hearings and the documentaries and the books all skip past, because it doesn't fit the narrative they need. I felt relieved, not guilty, not terrified, not remorseful, relieved. The way a person feels when they finally put down something very heavy that they had convinced themselves was not heavy. 16 years of maintenance, of certainty manufacturing, and it was over. The concrete prison was lighter than the mental prison I had been living in since 1992. I told investigators this. I told my lawyers this. Everyone assumed it was manipulation. It wasn't. It was just the truth. Here is what I need you to hold for the next 6 minutes. The question is not whether what I did was wrong. It was clearly, irreparably, catastrophically wrong. The question, the one nobody is willing to ask, is where exactly on the spectrum between what I did and what most people do every week is the line, and who gets to draw it? Before I answer that, I want to tell you about the last real conversation I had before everything ended. One of my earliest clients, a man who had invested with me since 1981. He had put his own money with me, then his daughter's college fund, then his son-in-law's retirement account. His name doesn't matter. His words do. When he found out, not from me, from the news the way most of them found out, he called me. I was already under investigation. I probably should not have answered. I answered. He didn't scream. He didn't threaten. He said very little. And what he said I have not stopped thinking about in the years since. I should have known. The returns didn't make sense, and I knew it, and I chose not to look. That's on me as much as it's on you. Maybe more. I wanted to believe it, and so I did. He hung up. I never heard from him again. I chose not to look. I have had years to think about that sentence, about what it means, about what it reveals, not about him, not about me, but about the specific, universal, entirely ordinary human impulse to not examine the things that are making us comfortable. You have chosen not to look at things too. Not at financial returns, at something closer. You have let someone believe they were more loved than they were, because ending the performance felt harder than continuing it. You have accepted a version of a situation you knew was incomplete because the complete version required you to act. You have stayed in something, a job, a relationship, a version of yourself, past the point when you knew it was wrong. Because the alternative was a kind of destruction you weren't ready for. I'm not comparing the damage. Your choices did not take anyone's retirement. I understand the difference in scale, and I'm not asking you to collapse that difference. I'm asking you to notice the mechanism of choosing comfort over clarity, of manufacturing just enough certainty that the people around you stop asking questions. I operated that mechanism at a scale that destroyed lives. Most people operate it at a scale that only slowly, quietly damages them. The scale is different. The psychology is identical. The most dangerous person in any room is not the one who lies to others. It's the one who has convinced themselves that their specific version of deception is justified, or doesn't count, or is different in some essential way from what everyone else calls deception. I counted myself out for 16 years. My clients counted themselves out for 16 years. We were, in that sense, a perfect match. The moment I knew it wasn't temporary. It was the 3rd year. A dinner. A client was describing me to his colleagues, talking about how I had changed his life, how safe he felt, how certain, and I sat there and I thought, if I tell him the truth right now, I destroy all of that. I destroy exactly what I built. The certainty I created. I couldn't do it. Not because I was afraid of what would happen to me. Because I couldn't watch the certainty leave his face. That was the moment. Not greed, not arrogance. The inability to destroy someone's sense of safety, even when maintaining it was a crime. He thanked me that night. He shook my hand. He told his colleagues I was the most trustworthy man he had ever met in finance. I drove home. I slept without difficulty. I don't think I'm a monster. I think I'm a person who found a very efficient way of not examining the things that would have forced me to change. That is different from monstrous. It is arguably more dangerous, because it is more common. I am not asking for sympathy. I have no interest in rehabilitation. I'm not trying to make you understand me. What I am doing, the only useful thing I can do from where I am, is describing a mechanism so accurately that someone might recognize it in themselves before it becomes irreversible. The mechanism is this: finding the version of events that lets you continue doing what you want to do, while allowing you to believe you are still, fundamentally, a good person. Every person in this story did that. Every person in your life is doing some version of it right now. You are doing some version of it right now. The question is not whether that's true. The question is, what is your version of it? And what would it take for you to look at it directly, without the comfort of telling yourself that yours is different? Think about the person in your life you trust most. The person whose certainty about you is the most valuable thing you own. Now think about what you would do if that certainty was based on a version of you that you've been carefully maintaining, not lying, not performing, just not correcting. The question isn't whether you've been deceived. The question is, how many of the people who love you are currently in the business of keeping you comfortable rather than keeping you informed? And how many of those people, if you're honest, are you? That is not a rhetorical question. I'd like you to think about it. My name doesn't matter, but I think if you've stayed this long, you know exactly who I am.